So just before this section is the annunciation to Mary that she's going to bear a child, and he shall be the Savior of the world. We got to remember that Mary's a kid by our standards. She would be an adult at the time, but she's 13, 14, 15. Can you imagine how overwhelming this must have been for her? She's engaged but not married, and an angel appears to her in private, tells her that she's going to become pregnant and have a child, and this child is going to save the world. And in the tradition of the church, her consent is not just a consent to bear a child. Her consent is to the whole story. But in the tradition of the church, she knew at that moment what this was going to cost. She knew that 33 years hence, she would watch him die. Alone. And she said yes. She said yes. And I think about what it must have been like for Mary after the angel leaves, and she's back in the dark of that room, thinking, what did I just say yes to? And I notice that in this story and in Luke's gospel, there's no mention of any of Mary's family, her mother, her father, the household that she lives in. She's engaged to Joseph, but she wouldn't be living with him at this time. Where's her family? Where are the people that are there to console her and comfort her? Where are the women that are going to help her understand what's about to happen to her body, what she's going to go through, the profound impact this is going to have, the risk that's coming to her? But she remembers the angel's word that Elizabeth, your relative, it doesn't say cousin, it says relative, whatever that means, is now, even in her old age, like 40, right, is pregnant, is going to have a child. She says, well, the angel told me that for a reason, so I'm going to go. Now, it's kind of far from where she lives in Nazareth to the hill country in Judea. It could be a week travel for her to get there. And I think about the thoughts that are churning in her mind, that week travel down from Nazareth, down from Galilee, all the way down into the Judean countryside, into the hill country, which is going to be even more isolated, just like Nazareth is. Nazareth is just a handful of families. It's really kind of nothing. It's off the trail. It's not really in any of the trade routes. It's about an hour's walk from Sepphoris, which is a fairly large city, but Nazareth itself is pretty backwoods, and it sounds like where Elizabeth lives is also equally backwoods. And I think about how low and lower Mary would get. We have no indication that she went with anyone. For any reason to assume she may have done this by herself. She may have joined a group of people that were traveling south, but she's there just with her thoughts. And can you imagine carrying a burden like that? You are going to bear a child who will be the Savior of the world, but you're going to do it unmarried. And what's that going to do to your little community in Nazareth? What's that going to do to your reputation and your family? I'm sure many of you have carried burdens like this. Maybe not this one. Probably not this one, I'm going to guess. Where you knew you were going to need to do something and it was going to be hard. You were going to need to say something and it was not going to be welcome. You were going to need to show up. And you weren't necessarily going to be wanted. And I just imagine her getting lower and lower and more anxious and more worried about showing up to this distant relative's house who doesn't know she's coming. Maybe she's sent word, but who knows? And as she gets lower and lower, and then climbs higher and higher to approach the house of Zechariah. Now let's remember who Zechariah is. Zechariah was the high priest up until probably just a few months ago when he lost his voice because he tried to talk back to an angel. Don't do that. And probably lost his job because you don't really get to be the high priest if you can't talk anymore. So I assume this is his kind of forced retirement home, right? Away from Jerusalem, away from all the hustle and bustle, kind of well, you did a good job. Here's your gold watch and please be on your way kind of deal. But this still is the house of the former high priest. And here's Mary, this young woman, secretly pregnant, having had an encounter with the divine that for all intents and purposes she didn't necessarily deserve to have, but here she is nonetheless. And then just imagine that moment. I always imagine that it's night. I imagine that it's dark. I imagine that she approaches this house and sees some light streaming out of a window or an opening. She heads up to the door and she opens it. And it's not just the light that comes out. It's not just the warmth of the room and the fire. It's not just the smell of the bread. It's the face of Elizabeth, who looks and sees. And you know this moment when you've arrived somewhere and you are so welcome there. You are anticipated with great joy and excitement. The person sees you. It's always a woman. She sees you and she loves you and she knows you and she jumps up to be with you. She wants to touch you and hold you and welcome you and tell you in no uncertain terms that you are beloved of God, and I'm so glad that you're here. And it just kind of destroys you a little bit because you think, is this for me? And you know that it is. It says that she cries out with a loud voice. She's yelling this. Blessed are you among women. And who am I that I should welcome you? This, the wife of the high priest, welcoming a young woman of no substantial identity into her home, yet sees her and speaks the blessing. Can you imagine what happens inside of Mary in that moment? All that doubt and fear and angst and uncertainty, and it just melts. Because there's a yes, there's an unambiguous yes that is given to her, not by an angel of the Lord with all power and might, but by a woman of flesh and blood who says, yes, I see you, I know you, I love you, we are in this together. I got you. I know your mom isn't here. I know your people aren't here. I know you don't know any of these people, but you know me, and I know you. Love is about how we show up, not about how we feel about it. Our culture has a real mixed bag understanding about what it is to love. We think we got to feel it. We think it's got to be like a vibe or an energy. No, it's about how we show up. Now, yeah, sure. Elizabeth she was filled with the Holy Spirit, right? She is on fire in that moment. But she chose how to speak this word. She chose to let the Spirit roll through her. When I read this story again this year, it reminded me of this experience in my life 20 years ago. I had a friend. I knew him, met him in elementary school, knew him all elementary school, middle school, high school, after high school. We both went to college, but we remained close. And he invites me out to dinner one night down on East Lake at a place called Pomodoro. I don't know why I remember this, but I remember this place. It's kind of cute. It's kind of dark inside. It's got a nice bar. So we're sitting at the bar, and he seems kind of anxious, right? He's kind of fidgeting a little bit. He's just got some like kind of wound up energy, and I'm like, dude, what's up? And he won't look at me, right? He's kind of sitting there, and he's like, you know Lena, my girlfriend? I'm like, oh yeah, totally, because like a couple months before I had been coming into the Puyallup Fair, and he and her had just been leaving, and randomly just like saw them. It was the first time I had met her. I had heard about her. They'd been dating for like a month at that point, so it's been like 2 or 3 months at this point. They met because they worked at a Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research together. She was a scientist, and he was somebody who watched after the dogs downstairs. It's a whole other story. Anyway, he kind of had a she's out of my league vibe to him, but it was great. Like, I was very happy for him. He says, yeah, you remember Lena? And I'm like, yeah. I haven't gotten to know her well, but I remember meeting her that one time, and he's like, yeah, she's pregnant. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I'm so happy for you. This is amazing. You've been wanting to be a dad ever since I've ever known you. This is phenomenal, dude. Congratulations. And he looked at me like, what? And then he got mad. I was like, what's up? And he's like, you are the first person that has said anything even remotely pleasant or positive. And I've told my mom and my dad and her parents and all other people that are close to me at work. Kind of like, well, why the fuck was I on that part of the list? But anyway, but he said every person to the person had either been like, oh, or they'd been like, ah, or they'd been like, so what are you going to do about it? And it made sense to me why he had brought. He got low and lower and lower. And even the people that knew him, his mom and his dad, their narrative was, this is not good. This is bad. This is a problem. And I have remembered this throughout my life, about how it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. It doesn't matter what outcome you can see. Here's this moment right here. And here's a person right in front of you. And he needed somebody to tell him, this is a gift. You are ready for this. Now, is anyone ever ready to have a kid? No. Right? You get ready. You adopt that kid and you have no idea what's about to happen. And then your whole world is like, oh damn, this is like 5 million times harder than I thought it was going to be. And it just continues that way. I say it doesn't get easier, it gets different kinds of hard. And you're never ready. But God doesn't call the prepared, God prepares those that are called. Because it's just this opportunity, this invitation, this reality that's in front of us, and God's saying, what are you going to say? Here's the angel of the Lord comes to Zechariah and says, your wife's going to be pregnant. And he says, no way. And the angel says, shush. Angel then, just a couple months later, comes to Mary and says, you're going to have a baby. And she says, here I am, servant of the Lord. Let it be with me, bring to your will. Even though she doesn't feel it, love is about how we show up, not about how we feel about it. I got hit by a car in 2006. I was riding a bike. Wear a helmet so that you don't die. That happened, and I didn't die, obviously. I was in the hospital, and I had people come in to visit me in the hospital. And some people were not ready. They thought they should come and visit me in the hospital, and then they showed up, and is young people, right? And they don't know nothing, and they don't know what a hospital is and is like. And like, I had a woman literally walk into my room and then faint, right? And my professor was there, and she was so mad at this young woman for coming and not being ready to be there. She was like, now you're the center of attention, and he's over here. No! Right? She wasn't ready to be there. She didn't show up to be there. But this other guy that I knew who lived in the house with me, I'll never forget what he said to me. He said to me, you are the best and worst person for this to happen to. And of course what he meant was like, you're somebody who's really safe, you had a light on your bike, you wore a helmet, you were pretty cautious. You didn't deserve this, right? It just happened, hit and run, whatever. That dude is in his own personal hell, the guy that hit me. It's none of my business. But also you're the best person because he knew me well enough to know you're gonna get through this. You're gonna weather this, you're gonna be okay. And it didn't matter whether he actually knew that was true or not. It mattered that he said that to me. It mattered that he spoke the blessing on me. Because then, every day after that, I knew this could have happened to so many other people, but it happened to me, and I can carry this. I can carry this, I can do this. And with that energy and with that thought in my mind, I then was able to give gift to those nurses and those doctors that came in that were working those long hours that had to come do all manner of nastiness to this wound on my leg. I had to teach them how to do it. I had to teach them how to change these dresses. There was a window into the meat of my leg for weeks. And I was able to provide the gift of like my lightness, my energy. These nurses wanted to hang out and talk to me a little bit longer. I got all this attention. I got extra onion rings and chocolate milkshakes. Like all this stuff they shouldn't probably have been feeding me, but it's because my cup was full up to overflowing because I had been blessed by the energy that had been given me. I had enough to give it out. I was full up, even though I was down, right? Because love is about how we show up, not about how we feel about it. I know people didn't want to come to the hospital. They didn't want to be around all the blood and the pain, and like the pain is constant. Some of you know about constant pain. It is hard. But they chose how they were going to show up, and they gave gift to me that allowed me to give gift out in the world. See, this is what it's really ultimately about. If we're going to love, if we're really going to love, we have to be willing to accept the world as it is and connect. We have to be willing to just accept the world. Here it is, right here, right now. It's not any different. I wish it was different. I wish these people were kinder. I wish that these people were more connected. I wish that this situation was different, but it's not. And here it is, and I'm going to accept it and step into it and connect. And if I can't connect with you because you're kind of a mess, I'm going to connect with God. And I'm going to treat you the way that I know you deserve because of who God is, not because of how I feel about you. Because maybe, just maybe, my pouring into you gets you to that place where you can then overflow. Because maybe your cup is empty. But I can't do that when I'm empty. I can't do that when I don't have anything. So where am I going to go to get it? Am I going to go to you to get it? Am I going to go to the world to get it? Am I going to go to the news to get it? Facebook to get it? I got to go to God to get it. I got to ground and remember. Love is about how we show up. So how are we preparing ourselves to show up? How are we getting ourselves ready so that we can show up and be agents of that good news? Thank God that Elizabeth allowed the Spirit to move so she could speak that blessing on Mary. Who knows what would have happened if that hadn't happened? For those of you that know anything about improv theater, there's this rule in theater. It's called yes and. Somebody offers you something. You don't reject it. You don't counter it. You accept it. And you add to it. Yes, and this other thing. You don't let whatever is stop you. You find a way to accept it and move with it. So my question to you is, right now, at this point in your life, what is God asking you to say yes and? Where is God inviting you to accept and connect, move, and give gift so that you can call this world that we need so badly into being? How are you going to show up?